The Galactic Council had ruled over known space for 12,000 years before humans ever learned to make fire. By the time Earth sent its first explorers beyond the solar system, the Council had already counted and ranked over 900 different intelligent species. They measured each one by their military power, their wealth, and their technology. Humanity ranked near the very bottom of the list. Ambassador Linda Morrison walked through the massive doors of the council chamber on the great station that floated between three dying stars. Her silver dress uniform was pressed and clean, and her gray hair was tied back in a simple knot. She was 63 years old. She had spent 40 of those years preparing for this moment. The chamber stretched out for her like a cathedral built by giants. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the curved seats that rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Some of them were beautiful in ways that made her heart ache. Others were so strange that her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. The Velthri delegation sat to her left. They were insect-like creatures with hard shells, the color of dried blood, and eyes that glittered like broken glass. Their leader, a massive female named Overseer Crixus, clicked her mandibles together in a sound that Linda had learned to recognize as laughter. The Karathi occupied an entire section by themselves. They were living stone, each one standing 3 meters tall, their bodies carved from what looked like granite and obsidian. When they moved, the floor shook. When they spoke, it sounded like an avalanche learning to form words. High Chancellor Zorvax watched her approach from his elevated throne at the center of the chamber. He was Selzari, a species that resembled earth snakes, but with 4 arms and scales that shifted color with their moods. Right now, his scales were a bored shade of gray. Linda stopped at the speaking platform and bowed her head slightly. Not too much? She had been warned about showing too much submission. Ambassador Morrison of Earth, Zorvax said. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated by the small device in her ear. You have requested to address the council regarding full membership for your species. You may speak. Linda straightened her shoulders. High Chancellor. Honored delegates. Humanity thanks you for this opportunity. We have been a spacefaring species for 300 years. In that time, we have established 17 colony worlds, developed faster than light travel, and made peaceful contact with 47 different intelligent species. She paused, looking around the chamber. Most of the delegates were not even pretending to pay attention. Some were talking among themselves. Others appeared to be sleeping. We come before you today to request full membership in the Galactic Council. We offer partnership, trade, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation. We believe that humanity has much to contribute to the galactic community. The laughter started with the Velthari. Overseer Crixus threw back her head and made a clicking, chittering sound that spread through her delegation like wildfire. The Karathi joined in with deep rumbling noises that shook Linda's bones. Soon, half the chamber was laughing. High Chancellor. Zorvax let it continue for a long moment before raising one of his hands for silence. His scales had shifted to an amused shade of purple. Ambassador Morrison, he said, your species has been spacefaring for 3 centuries. The Velthari alone have conquered 17 star systems in that time. The Karathi have existed for longer than your star has burned. You come here with your 47 ships and your 17 little worlds and ask to sit as equals? Among civilizations that were ancient when your ancestors were learning to walk upright. He leaned forward, his serpentine body shifting on his throne. What do humans offer that we could possibly want? Linda kept her face perfectly calm. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times. We offer ourselves, High Chancellor, our creativity, our determination, our willingness to learn and grow. More laughter. Overseer Crixus rose from her seat, her hard shell gleaming under the chamber lights. I have seen your ships, human. They are slow, weak. My children's toys are more dangerous. Your species is soft and fragile. You die if the temperature changes by a few degrees. You die if you do not drink water for 3 days. You are prey animals pretending to be hunters. The Karathi delegate, a massive being named Stone That Speaks, added his voice to the mockery. The humans are amusing, like pets. Perhaps we should keep some of them for entertainment. Linda stood perfectly still as the laughter washed over her. She did not defend humanity. She did not argue. She simply waited until the noise died down. "I understand," she said quietly. "Then I will not waste any more of the council's time." Sorvax waved one of his hands dismissively. "Go home, little species. Return when you have something worth our attention. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, you will have grown enough to deserve a seat at this table." Linda bowed her head again. "As you wish, High Chancellor." She turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floor, steady and unhurried. Behind her, the laughter continued. The doors closed behind her, and she was alone in the corridor. She allowed herself one deep breath, then another. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her face remained calm. A young human officer was waiting for her. His name was Daniel Hayes, and he served as her military attaché. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that were currently filled with barely controlled anger. "Ambassador," he said, "I heard everything. How can you just accept that?" Linda started walking toward the docking bay where their ship waited. "Because that is what they expect us to do, Daniel. Accept. Submit. Go away quietly and never bother them again." "Is that what we're going to do?" Linda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are going to do exactly what humanity has always done when faced with those who underestimate us. We are going to wait. We are going to watch. We are going to learn." She stopped and turned to face him, her gray eyes sharp and bright. "The Council has existed for 12,000 years, Daniel. They have seen hundreds of species rise and fall. They think they know everything there is to know about the universe and everyone in it. They look at us and see a weak, young species that poses no threat and offers no value." She started walking again. "They do not know that we have been listening to their communications for over a century. They do not know that we have learned their languages, mapped their territories, studied their weaknesses. They do not know about the facilities hidden on the dark side of our moon, or the research stations buried beneath the ice of Europa, or the construction yards that orbit our furthest colonies." Daniel fell into step beside her. "What are we building, Ambassador?" Linda did not answer immediately. They reached the docking bay, and she paused at the entrance to their ship. A small diplomatic vessel that looked like a toy compared to the massive warships that filled the station. "We are building patience, Daniel. And when the time comes, we will show them what patience can achieve." She stepped onto the ship and did not look back. The Council continued to laugh at humanity for the next 50 years. They mocked human diplomats, bullied human traders, and treated human colonies as obstacles to be pushed aside. They never noticed that every insult, every humiliation, every act of cruelty was being recorded, cataloged. And remember, they never noticed that humanity was smiling back, and they never, not once, thought to ask why. 50 years passed, like water flowing downhill. Humanity spread across the stars, slowly and quietly, building colonies on worlds that no other species wanted. They traded with whoever would trade with them, accepted whatever prices they were offered, and never complained when those prices were unfair. The Galactic Council barely noticed them at all. Captain, Daniel Hayes had grown old in those 50 years. His hair had turned white, and lines had carved themselves deep into his face. But his eyes were still sharp, and his hands were still steady on the controls of his ship. The Endurance was not a warship. She was a supply vessel, built to carry food and medicine and equipment between human colonies. Her hull was thick, but unarmored. Her engines were reliable, but slow. She carried no weapons larger than a few defensive cannons that could barely scratch the paint on a reel. Military vessel, Daniel had commanded her for 15 years. He knew every sound she made, every vibration in her hull, every quirk of her aging systems. He loved her, the way a farmer loves his land, or a craftsman loves his tools. His first officer was Lieutenant Commander Karen Wright, a woman half his age with red hair and a temper to match. She had been assigned to the Endurance 3 years ago, fresh from the academy, and Daniel had watched her grow from a nervous young officer into someone he trusted with his life. Captain Karen said from her station, I'm picking up a vessel on long-range sensors. Velthary configuration. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Distance. For light minutes and closing, they're on an intercept course. He studied the tactical display, noting their position relative to the nearest human outpost. They were 3 light-years outside Velthary territory, well within neutral space according to every treaty and agreement that the Council recognized. "Open a channel," he said. The communication screen flickered to life, and Daniel found himself looking at a Velthary commander. The alien's compound eyes reflected the light of his bridge like shattered mirrors. His mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that Daniel had learned to recognize as aggression. "Human vessel," the Velthary said. "You are in Velthary space. Surrender your cargo and prepare to be boarded." Daniel kept his voice calm. "Velthary vessel. This is Captain Daniel Hayes of the Endurance. According to Council-recognized boundaries, we are currently in neutral territory. Our navigation records show that we are 3 light-years outside your border." The Velthary commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your records are wrong, human. This space belongs to the Velthary now. You will comply, or you will be destroyed." Karen looked at Daniel, her face pale. "Captain, they're powering weapons." Daniel's mind raced through his options. The Endurance could not outrun a Velthary warship. She certainly could not outfight one. Their only hope was to convince the commander that attacking them would cause more trouble than it was worth. Commander Daniel said carefully, "I must inform you that attacking a civilian vessel in neutral space is a violation of galactic law. If you fire on us, there will be consequences." The Velthary leaned forward, his mandibles spreading in what Daniel now recognized as a smile. "Consequences? From humans? Your entire fleet cannot scratch my ship's hull. Your species is nothing. Less than nothing. You exist because we allow you to exist." He raised one of his clawed hands. "Fire." The first shot hit the Endurance amidships, tearing through her hull like paper. Daniel was thrown from his chair as the ship shuddered and screamed around him. Alarms wailed. Lights flickered and died. "Shields are gone," Karen shouted over the noise. "Hull breach on deck 3. We have casualties. Get us out of here," Daniel ordered. "Maximum speed. Any direction." The Endurance ran. Her engines pushed themselves beyond their limits, and warning lights covered every console on the bridge. Behind them, the Velthary ship fired again and again, each shot punching new holes in their hull. By the time they reached the human outpost at Proxima Station, 17 of Daniel's crew were dead. 30 more were wounded. The Endurance herself was barely holding together, her hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Daniel sat in his command chair as medical teams rushed through his broken ship. He watched them carry the bodies of his people past him, wrapped in white sheets that were already staining red. He had served humanity for 60 years. He had accepted every insult, swallowed every humiliation, obeyed every order to stand down and walk away. He had done these things because he believed they were right, because he trusted that patience would eventually be rewarded. But as he watched them carry young Lieutenant Cooper past him, the woman who had just celebrated her 25th birthday, something changed inside him. Some lines could not be crossed. On Earth. In a chamber, buried 2 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, a very different meeting was taking place. Admiral Gregory Stone stood at the head of a long table made of polished, black granite. He was 80 years old, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen things he would never speak of. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human civilization. Military commanders, government leaders, scientists, diplomats. President Catherine Walsh sat at the opposite end of the table. She was younger than most of the others, only 52, with dark skin and silver-streaked hair that she wore in tight braids. She had been president for 6 years, and in that time she had learned things about humanity's true position in the galaxy that still kept her awake at night. 17 dead, Admiral Stone said. His voice was flat, controlled, but everyone in the room could hear the anger beneath it. 17 of our people murdered in neutral space. The Velthary broadcast the attack across every galactic network. They are calling it proof of human weakness. The Council has done nothing. President Walsh studied the report in front of her. The Council's position. They ruled that the Velthari were within their rights to secure their borders. They rejected our request for an investigation. They suggested that we avoid Velthari space in the future. A murmur of anger rippled around the table. Walsh raised her hand for silence. "And what do you recommend, Admiral?" Stone touched a control on the table, and a holographic display appeared above them. It showed not ships or weapons, but a complex network that spread across dozens of star systems. Nodes and connections glowed blue against the darkness, forming a web that encompassed everything humanity had built. "We have been patient," Stone said. "We have endured every insult, every attack, every humiliation. We did this because we were not ready, because the project needed more time." He looked around the table. "The project is complete. We are ready." Walsh studied the hologram for a long moment. She knew what it represented. She had been briefed when she first took office, sworn to secrecy so absolute that she could not share it even with her own family. "The Velthari are powerful," she said. "The Council is more powerful still. If we move against them and fail, they will destroy us." Yes, Stone agreed. "Which is why we will not fail." He expanded the display, showing the full scope of what humanity had built in secret over the past century. The room fell silent as the others absorbed what they were seeing. Finally, Walsh spoke again. "How long until deployment?" 72 hours. She nodded slowly, her face unreadable. "Then we will give them 72 hours to reconsider. Send the warning first. Let them see what is coming. Give them one chance to make things right." Stone raised an eyebrow. "And if they refuse?" President Walsh stood, her chair scraping against the stone floor. She walked to the holographic display and reached out to touch one of the glowing nodes. "Then we will teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. Humanity does not forgive, and we never, ever forget." She turned to face the room. "Send the message." The message arrived everywhere at the same time. It appeared on screens in the council chamber. It played from speakers in Velthari military bases. It echoed through the stone halls of Korathi homeworlds. Every major government, every military installation, every communication network in known space received it at the exact same moment. The technology required to do this should have been impossible. Chancellor Zorvax was in his private chambers. When the message arrived, he was reviewing trade agreements with his advisory council. His serpentine body coiled comfortably around his favorite resting stone. The sudden appearance of a human face on his personal screen made him hiss with annoyance. Ambassador Linda Morrison looked older than when he had last seen her. 50 years ago in the council chamber, her hair was completely white now, and her face was lined with age. But her eyes were different. The quiet patience that had defined her during their previous meeting was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. "Hi, Chancellor Zorvax," she said. "This message is being broadcast simultaneously to every major power in the Galactic Council. I speak on behalf of United Earth and all human territories." Zorvax gestured for his advisors to remain silent. "This was unexpected, and unexpected things required attention. 47 days ago," Linda continued, "the Velthari warship Crimson Blade attacked the human vessel Endurance in neutral space. 17 human citizens were killed. The attack was unprovoked and illegal under galactic law. We submitted a formal complaint to the Council and requested an investigation." Her voice remained steady, but Zorvax could hear something beneath the words. Something dangerous. "The Council ruled in favor of the Velthari. No investigation was conducted. No justice was offered. Our dead were dismissed as unimportant." She leaned closer to the camera. "We have waited 47 days for the Council to reconsider. You have not. So now I will explain what happens next." Zorvax felt his scales shift color involuntarily. He forced them back to a neutral gray. "In exactly 12 hours, humanity will conduct a demonstration. This demonstration will show a small fraction of what we have built during the centuries that you spent laughing at us. After the demonstration, you'll have one standard galactic cycle to deliver the Velthari. Commanders responsible for the attack on the Endurance to Earth, they will face trial for their crimes." She paused, And when she spoke again, her voice was ice. If you fail to deliver them, we will come for them ourselves, and we will not stop until justice is served. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is a warning. The screen went dark. For a long moment, Zorvac sat in silence. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. "The humans threaten us," he said to his advisors. "How delightful. Summon the Velthary ambassador. I want to share this with him." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in 100 different chambers. The Velthary High Command watched the message and clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Karathi rumbled with laughter that shook their ancient halls. Even the smaller species, those who had no quarrel with humanity, dismissed the warning as desperate posturing. Only a few watched the message and felt something other than contempt. On the Velthary homeworld, Overseer Crixus gathered her senior commanders in the Great War Hall. The chamber was built from the shells of conquered enemies, a monument to Velthary superiority that had stood for 3,000 years. "The humans have given us 12 hours, she said. "How generous of them." Commander Velzer, her second-in-command, stepped forward. "Overseer, what is your response?" Crixus turned her compound eyes toward him. "Response? There is no response. The humans have 47 ships. We have 47,000. They cannot threaten us. They cannot hurt us. They are insects pretending to be predators." But the warning mentioned a demonstration. "Perhaps we should take precautions." Crixus made a sound of contempt. "Precautions against what? What can the humans possibly do to us? They have no weapons that can penetrate our shields. They have no ships that can match our speed. They have nothing." She gestured at the walls around them, decorated with the trophies of countless victories. "In 12 hours, nothing will happen. The humans will make some pathetic display of their primitive technology, and we will laugh at them again. Then they will slink back to their little worlds and accept their place in the order of things." Velzer bowed his head. "As you command, Overseer," on a human station hidden in the shadow of a dying star. Commander Samantha Cole was preparing for war. She was 34 years old, young for a position of such responsibility. Her dark hair was cut short, and her brown eyes held a focus that made her subordinates nervous. She had been chosen for this mission because she was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly loyal to humanity. "Status report," she said. Lieutenant Commander Peter Grant consulted his console. "All systems are green, Commander. The network is fully operational. Fleet elements are in position. How many ships do we have?" 4,000, Commander. All cloaked and holding position around the target zone." Samantha nodded. 4,000 ships. Not the 47 that the galaxy believed humanity possessed, but 4,000. Built in secret, hidden in the dark spaces between stars, crewed by men and women who had trained for decades for this moment, and the primary weapon. Peter hesitated. Even after all his training, the answer made him uncomfortable. "Ready for deployment. Targeting systems are locked on the Velthary colony of Nexer Prime, home to 14 million Velthary citizens, the military headquarters of their entire Eastern Fleet, protected by orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons, and a permanent garrison of 300 warships in 11 hours. They would learn how little their protections mattered," Commander Peters said quietly. "Are you sure about this?" 14 million people. Samantha turned to face him. Her expression was not cruel, but it was hard in a way that left no room for doubt. "The weapon does not kill, Lieutenant Commander. It disables. Every piece of technology on that planet will stop functioning for approximately 6 hours. After that, systems will restore themselves. No permanent damage will be done." She walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. "For 300 years, humanity has been patient. We have accepted every insult. We have endured every humiliation. We have watched our people die while the galaxy laughed at our weakness," her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "That ends today. Today, we show them what patience looks like when it finally runs out. Today, we teach them that the quiet species, the weak species, The species they dismissed as prey animals has been watching them, learning from them, building weapons they cannot imagine. She turned back to her crew. Today, we make them understand that humanity was never weak. We were waiting. The countdown continued in council chambers across the galaxy. Leaders discussed the human warning and laughed at its absurdity. In military headquarters, commanders made jokes about human arrogance. In homes and gathering places, ordinary citizens wondered what the strange little species was thinking. None of them knew what was coming. None of them were prepared. And when the 12 hours ended, none of them would ever laugh at humanity again, the colony of Nexer. Prime was the pride of the Velthari Eastern Territories. 14 million citizens lived beneath its purple skies. Great cities of crystalline spires rose from the surface, connected by networks of transportation tubes that carried millions of passengers every hour. Military installations dotted the landscape, housing weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. 300 warships orbited above, their crews confident in the knowledge that no enemy would dare approach. Commander Veltha stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, watching the planet turn slowly below him. He had received the human warning along with everyone else, and like everyone else, he had dismissed it as meaningless, Commander, his sensor officer said. The 12-hour deadline has passed. Velthus clicked his mandibles in amusement. And what has happened? Nothing. As predicted, turned to his communications officer. Prepare a message for broadcast. I want every human ship to hear that their bluff has failed and that the Velthari do not negotiate with insects. Yes, Commander. I am preparing the message now. The words were barely out of her mouth when every light on the planet below went out. Velthus spun toward the viewport, his compound eyes trying to process what he was seeing. The cities that had blazed with light moments ago were now dark. The transportation networks had stopped moving. The defense platforms that ringed the planet had gone silent. He demanded. His sensor officer was staring at her console in disbelief. I do not understand, Commander. It appears that every electronic system on the planet has stopped functioning. Power plants, communication networks, weapons systems, everything. It is all offline. That is impossible. Yes, Commander. But it is happening. On the surface of Nexer Prime, chaos was spreading. Citizens who had been riding in transportation tubes found themselves trapped in darkness. Hospitals lost power, and patients on life support began to die. Aircraft fell from the sky, crashing into buildings that had no warning systems to alert their inhabitants. Emergency services tried to respond, but their vehicles would not start. Their communications would not work. Their weapons would not fire. The great military base at the center of the capital city became a tomb. Soldiers found themselves sealed inside chambers they could not open, their armor locked around them like coffins. Weapons designed to destroy enemy fleets became useless chunks of metal and crystal. In orbit, Commander Velthus watched helplessly as ships began to fall. Vessels that had been in low orbit, relying on their engines to maintain position, suddenly found themselves without power. They tumbled toward the planet, their crews screaming into communication systems that no longer worked. The first impacts sent mushroom clouds of fire rising from the surface. Get us closer, Velthus ordered. We must help them, Commander. I recommend caution. We do not know what caused this. If we enter the affected zone, we may suffer the same fate.
Help us.
Hesitated. His flagship was positioned at the edge of what his officers were calling the dead zone, a sphere of technological darkness that encompassed the entire planet and everything within 100,000 kilometers of its surface, before he could decide. The human ships arrived. They came out of nowhere. One moment, the sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 4,000 vessels filled the void around the Velthari fleet. They were unlike anything Velthos had ever seen. Sleek and angular, with hulls that seemed to drink in the light. They made no sound, broadcast no signals, and moved with a precision that seemed almost unnatural. A communication request appeared on his screen. Velthus stared at it for a long moment, then accepted. The face that appeared was young, female, and utterly calm. "I'm Commander Samantha Cole of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. Your planet's technology has been temporarily disabled. In approximately 6 hours, systems will begin to restore themselves. No permanent damage has been done. Aldous found his voice. What have you done? Our people are dying down there, Samantha replied. They are. Approximately 1,200 of your citizens will die today because of the chaos caused by our demonstration. 1,200 deaths from a population of 14 million. Her expression did not change. 17 of our people died on the Endurance. Your commander broadcast their deaths across the galaxy and called it proof of human weakness. You laughed at us. Your council laughed at us. The entire galaxy laughed at us. She leaned forward slightly. We are not laughing, Commander. We are explaining. Consider this a demonstration of restraint. We could have killed every living thing on that planet. We could have turned your cities to ash and your oceans to poison. Instead, we turned off your lights for 6 hours. Velthus looked at the silent planet below, at the 4,000 ships that surrounded his fleet, at the face on his screen that showed no anger, no hatred, nothing but cold, patient calculation. What do you want? He asked. The same thing we wanted when your people murdered our crew. Justice. You have 1 galactic cycle to deliver the commanders, responsible for the attack on the Endurance. If you comply, nothing more will happen. If you refuse, the next demonstration will not be temporary. The transmission ended. Velthus sat in his command chair and watched the human fleet hold position around his planet. His 300 warships had not fired a single shot. They had not even been given the chance. The humans had appeared, disabled an entire world, and delivered their ultimatum before anyone could react. Commander, his sensor officer said quietly, I am detecting additional human vessels. Hundreds of them. They are moving toward our other colonies. Velthus closed his eyes. Across the galaxy, the recording of the Nexer Prime incident spread through every network. Leaders who had laughed at the human warning 12 hours ago watched in silence as an entire planet went dark. Military commanders studied the footage of 4,000 human ships appearing from nowhere. It felt something they had not experienced in generations. Fear, High Chancellor. Zorvac summoned an emergency session of the Galactic Council. For the first time in living memory, every delegate attended. The chamber that had echoed with laughter at humanity's expense was now silent. We must respond, Overseer, Crixus demanded. Her voice was harsh, but those who knew her could hear the uncertainty beneath it. The humans have attacked our territory. This is an act of war, is it? Asked Stone That Speaks, the Karathi delegate. They killed no one directly. They disabled technology, nothing more. By their own laws, they have committed no crime. 1,200 of my people are dead. 1,200 died in accidents caused by the loss of power. By that standard, every time a storm knocks out electricity on any world, nature itself commits murder. The council descended into argument. Some called for immediate military action against Earth and all human colonies. Others urged caution, pointing out that humanity had clearly been hiding capabilities that no one had suspected. A few suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to treat humans as equals rather than insects. Through it all, High Chancellor Zorvax remained silent. He was thinking about Ambassador Linda Morrison, about the patient expression on her face when he had dismissed her decades ago, about the cold certainty in her eyes when she delivered the warning. Humanity had been waiting, planning, building, and they had done it all while the galaxy watched. Them and saw nothing but weakness. What else had they built? What other surprises were hidden in the dark spaces between stars? And most importantly, what would happen if the council refused their demands? The debate continued through the night and into the morning, but Zorvax already knew how it would end. The humans had made their position clear. Now, the galaxy had to decide whether to listen. 1 galactic cycle passed. It was roughly equal to 47 Earth days, long enough for civilizations to debate, argue, and make decisions that would shape the future of known space. The Velthari did not comply. Overseer Crixus stood before her people and declared that the Velthari Dominion would never surrender its own commanders to a species of prey animals. She called the human demonstration a trick, a one-time event that could not be repeated. She promised that any human vessel entering Veltri space would be destroyed without mercy. Her speech was broadcast across the galaxy. Many species applauded her defiance. They believed that showing weakness to humanity now would only encourage further aggression. They believed that the natural order of things, where the strong ruled and the weak submitted, must be preserved. They were wrong. On the 48th day, the Veltri military shipyard at Corvin Station went dark. 15,000 workers found themselves trapped aboard a station without power, without gravity, without air recycling. Human rescue ships arrived exactly 3 hours before life support would have failed completely. The workers were evacuated to the surface of a nearby moon. The shipyard itself remained offline for 6 days. On the 53rd day, the Veltri communication hub that connected their eastern and western territories went dark. For 2 days, their fleet could not coordinate, could not share intelligence, could not even confirm that their ships were still intact. When power returned, they found human vessels waiting at every jump point, watching silently. On the 61st day, the Veltri capital itself experienced a partial blackout. Only the government district was affected, but the message was clear. Nowhere was safe. Nothing was beyond humanity's reach. The Veltri people began to ask questions that their leaders could not answer. How were the humans doing this? How could they be stopped? Most importantly, why were their glorious commanders refusing to simply hand over a few officers to end this nightmare? On the 74th day, the commanders responsible for the attack on the Endurance were found outside the human embassy on Nexer Prime. They had been left there by their own soldiers, bound and gagged, with a note pinned to their uniforms that simply read enough. Overseer Crixus gave a speech denouncing the cowards who had surrendered their brothers to the enemy. She woke to find her personal guard had abandoned her. By evening, she had resigned her position and retreated to a remote estate where she would spend the rest of her days in silence. The commanders were transported to Earth, where they faced trial before a human court. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. The evidence was presented clearly and completely. The verdicts were guilty. Sentences were imprisonment, not execution. Served in facilities designed for alien physiology, many species watched the trial and expected brutality. They expected torture, humiliation, a display of human vengeance to match the violence they had imagined. Instead, they saw justice. Calm, methodical, impartial justice. It was perhaps the most unsettling thing humanity had done yet. "Hi, Chancellor." Zorvax requested an audience with Ambassador Linda Morrison. She agreed to meet him aboard the council, stationed in the same chamber where he had dismissed her decades ago. The chamber was empty except for the two of them. The seats where hundreds of delegates had laughed at humanity stood silent and dark. Zorvax had ordered it cleared because he did not want witnesses to what he was about to say. "How?" he asked. His scales were pale, his movements slow and tired. "How did you hide this from us? We have monitored your species for 300 years. Our intelligence networks are the finest in the galaxy. How did you build 4,000 ships and a weapon that can disable planets without us noticing?" Linda stood where she had stood all those years ago. Her silver uniform was the same, but everything else had changed. Now it was Zorvax who seemed small and uncertain. "You never looked," she said simply. "You were so certain of your superiority that it never occurred to you that we might be doing anything other than accepting our place at the bottom. Every insult, every humiliation, every dismissal bought us time. Time to learn, time to build, time to prepare. And the technology itself? The weapon that turns off entire worlds?" Linda smiled slightly. "That I will not share. But I will tell you this much. It is not a weapon in the way you understand weapons. It is a network, a system of devices spread across known space, hidden in asteroids and comets and the dust between stars. It took us 100 years to build it, and it can reach anywhere within council space in a matter of hours. Zorvax absorbed this information. You could destroy us. All of us. Yes, but you choose not to. Also yes." Linda walked closer to him, her footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Hi, Chancellor. Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to conquer or destroy. We want exactly what we have always wanted: a seat at the table, a voice in the council. The same respect you give to every other member species. And if we refuse, Linda's expression did not change. Everywhere, all at once. And they stay out until you reconsider. Zorvax was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his serpentine head. Ambassador Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally invite the United Earth government to accept full membership. Your species will be granted 3 permanent seats and voting rights equal to any other major power. Linda nodded. Humanity accepts. She extended her hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Zorvax took it with one of his own. His grip was cold and dry, but it was real. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador. The announcement was made the following day. Human delegates took their seats in the Great Chamber, and this time, no one laughed. The Velthari delegates were notably absent, their government still in chaos from the fall of Overseer Crixus. The Karathi watched with expressions of stone that revealed nothing. Over the following years, humanity proved to be exactly what Linda had promised. They did not seek revenge, and they did not abuse their power. They participated in council debates. With patience and reason, voting sometimes with one faction and sometimes with another, always according to the merits of each case. The technology that had brought the Velthari to their knees remained a closely guarded secret. Rumors spread about what else humanity might have hidden, what other weapons might be waiting in the darkness between stars. But humanity never confirmed or denied these rumors. They simply smiled and continued being helpful neighbors, 10 years after the Nexer Prime incident. Gah! Ambassador Linda Morrison retired. She was 93 years old, and she had spent her entire adult life working toward a single goal. Now that goal was achieved. She returned to Earth and settled in a small house on the coast, in a region that had once been called Maine. She spent her days reading, gardening, and watching the waves break against the rocky shore. Sometimes visitors came. Diplomats from other species, curious about the woman who had faced the council's mockery and never wavered. They asked her the same question Zorvax had asked. How? She always gave the same answer. Taught us patience by treating us as if we had nothing else. You were so busy laughing that you never noticed we were listening, learning, growing, building. In the end, you taught us everything we needed to know. She would smile then, a grandmother's smile that held centuries of carefully hidden steel. Thank you for the lesson. The visitors would leave confused and thoughtful, and Linda would return to her garden, where the flowers she had planted were just beginning to bloom. Humanity had waited 300 years for its place among the stars. Now the waiting was over, and the stars themselves knew better than to laugh.